Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron, and today we've got another episode of Scotch Sunday. Now, believe it or not, it's actually kind of a challenge sometimes to decide which whiskeys I review in which videos. Over on the American whiskey side of the channel, it's a little bit easier just because I'm always trying to get the newest, most limited special releases and get those videos out as quickly as I can. But when it comes to the Scotch reviews in particular, it's a little more challenging because I don't have the money to buy all of the limited releases on this side of things as well. And frankly, being in Ohio, which is a control state, we don't get all of those new limited releases. I have to find a lot of these things on secondary. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's just kind of an untenable thing. So I often find myself looking through my, library of Scotch, my shelves here and in the basement, trying to find what the most relevant thing would be, but I also don't want to always review bottles that I've had for like 5 years because sometimes, new things come out, new editions of these bottles, and you don't know if what you're reviewing is what other people have. Why am I saying all this? Well, I was just outside mowing the grass and I came inside. I thought to myself, what would be a refreshing whiskey in this moment? I smell like freshly cut grass. It's springtime, getting into summertime. It's warm outside. And one thing came to mind. I was not limiting myself to Scotch, but all I could think about was Talisker 10 year. So we're going to do a Talisker 10-year review right now. And then I realized that I actually have a sample of Talisker 18, which is from one of my Patreon members, Lito, who's been an amazing supporter of the channel over the last couple of years. So we're going to get a double header review today, Talisker 10-year as well as Talisker 18. We're obviously going to start with the 10-year. This is bottled at 45.8% ABV. So just under that 46% ABV mark that a lot of people like to see. This is, again, a product I think about when I think of springtime, summertime. I think moving forward, I'm going to have to do some reviews or videos rather that are going to be like, the best springtime or summertime scotches. Let me know if you'd be interested in that kind of a video. This one, obviously coming from the Isle of Skye, has a little bit of a peat influence, a little bit of a maritime kind of thing. It's coastal, right? So we kind of have that expectation, but not all spring or summertime whiskeys need to have that necessarily. So maybe I'll put a video like that together with a variety of different scotches. But let's check out this 10-year first, then we'll get on to the 18-year. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. Here we go on the nose, Talisker 10-year. Okay, so I love this whiskey so much. It's just sweet peat. Yes, there is that briny sea air thing going on. There's beautiful honey sweetness in here. There is just a teeny little bit for me. This is more of like almost like a cigarette ash kind of peat. And when I say that, I mean very, very subtle on that ashiness, I would say. Most of it is like again, a sweet peat, almost like a wet rock sensation on the nose. But at the end of the day, very coastal. I mean, you feel like you are on a beach, with waves crashing against rocks, maybe. I mean, those are the kind of images that I have in my mind, that kind of smell in the air. That's exactly what this whiskey captures. Very much a terroir kind of whiskey, terroir driven. Puts you in a place, puts you in a certain place and time. I love whiskeys like this is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, there's also kind of like this little bit of a bitter bite to the whiskey. I would say it's kind of this word. When I was growing up, I used to think it was a funny word, pithy, right? Like I'm getting orange skins, like kind of like apple skins. It's very much the skin of the fruit where you're getting that kind of little bitter bite to it. Yes, I think that's kind of a youthful quality to the whiskey, but I don't say that in a way that is that has like a negative connotation. I don't think it's that at all. I mean, I think that's what keeps this thing kind of crisp and refreshing and like a whiskey that I would want to be drinking, whether I'm outside cutting the grass or on the beach or whatever the case may be. That's one of those notes that makes it feel kind of crisp and refreshing for me. So overall, I guess what I'm trying to say at this point is that it's light. It's sweet. It's got a little bit of that smoky peatiness to it, but in a way that's more wet rock, tinge of ashiness, tinge of that brighter, cigarette ash almost. People might think that I'm crazy for saying that. They might just entirely say that this is sweet peat to them. I wouldn't disagree with you. To me, I'm a little sensitive, and sometimes I call cigarette ash on things that may not necessarily have it, but I'm getting just a little tinge of that here. Beautiful nose, and also the last thing I want to call out is just a little bit of like a milk chocolate. Yeah, maybe milk chocolate or a little bit of that kind of cocoa powder sensation on the nose as well. But all in all, This to me is like a quintessential springtime, summertime whiskey. A lot of people don't think peated necessarily when they think of, you know, spring or summer whiskeys. I don't always, but in this case, I think this is spot on. So on the palate now, cheers. Oh, it's great. It's so great. Front of the palate, sweet honey, that wet rock kind of mineral peat note on the front end. And as it starts to develop, very sour. And I like that. Crisp, refreshing, a little bit drying for me. And I think that's coming from some of those sour notes. That kind of, fruit skins. You know, I think in this case, I'm really getting citrus notes and something like a green apple peel. Like those are the things I'm bouncing between here with regards to that fruity sourness. And as we get into the finish, kind of playing off of some of those tart or sour fruit notes would be this little bitterness that's coming from almost like a dark chocolate, I guess, like a baker's chocolate. It's not a big dominant note on the finish. It's really more of a sensation on the palate, if that makes any sense. First sip, though, makes me want to go back for a second one, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. Oh. As your palate acclimates to this whiskey, everything kind of comes together on the second sip on the front of the palate. So it's not as defined on the front as being for me like a honey and a mineral or wet rock peatiness. Now the front of the palate was all encompassing. It had a lot of those fruit notes within the front of the palate. It also still had the other notes, the honey, the wet rock, but it was much more comprehensive on that second sip. So I think this is a whiskey where the first sip does kind of shock your palate, not because it's crazily peated or anything like that. It's just a profile that I think your palate has to get used to. And on that second sip, you can really dive in a little bit deeper and it feels more complete. And again, on the finish now, yeah, just left with some really nice, kind of peppery smokiness. I haven't mentioned that peppery note yet. There is a great kind of white pepper thing that dances around on the palate. You're left with that. You're left with a little bit of that mineral peat that I like to say, a little bit of that ash note. Yeah, I think this is really fantastic stuff, and we will revisit it in this comparison, but now it's time to move over to the Talisker 18-year, and this is a product that I'm not familiar with whatsoever, which makes this review kind of exciting for me. You're really going to get kind of my first impressions, first thoughts on this. The proof is interesting on this, or the ABV, where the 10-year is 45.8, the 18-year is 48.5, so it's actually a higher ABV with the higher age statement. That's something that I like to see. Sometimes you get these higher age scotches and they get presented still at low ABVs, maybe even lower than the core lineup. That is always a shame in my opinion, because with that extra age generally comes mellowing of the profile. Even if it becomes more complex, deep and rich, it's typically more mellow. And especially when you're talking about peated whiskeys or coastal whiskeys or any combination of the two, those notes, those briny notes and those smoky notes are typically lessened because of the age. And so to get a little extra ABV kick here is kind of a nice thing. So here we go, Talisker 18, first impressions. Let's see what this is all about. Ooh, yeah, so this is much more relaxed on the nose. If I had these in a blind, I would probably think that the 10-year has a, 3 to 4% advantage over the 18-year. This is really mellow on the nose. Yeah, and as one might expect, it's a significantly more mellow profile here. Whereas on the 10-year, I was getting all of those skin notes, those fruit skin notes. The 18-year feels like overripe fruit notes, and it's much more in that like overripe tropical fruit, mango, pineapple. Definitely still some like orange citrus kind of notes here, but in this case, it really feels more like a caramelized orange. Yes, and the honey notes are deeper, richer. There's just like an overall kind of caramel profile to this Talisker 18 that the 10-year on the nose, let's see here. Yeah, it doesn't really have that, right? The comparison becomes a little more stark, and the 10-year feels significantly younger once you smell the 18-year. But this 18, very caramelized, heavy, dense, rich. Smells great. I don't want to say it smells underwhelming necessarily, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers, but I would love to smell this at an even higher ABV. I think that would be kind of a cool thing. Another thing that I'm picking up on the nose of this 18-year, kind of a leather note in the background, but there's like a coffee bean thing. Whereas the 10-year on the very end of the finish to me had that sensation of a dark chocolate kind of bitterness to it. This actually has a dark chocolate or even coffee note in the nose of the whiskey for the 18. I love that. That's a selfishly, subjectively, a note that I can't get enough of. So much so that even the Glenmorangie Signet, which is NAS, very expensive, we don't really know what's actually in the bottle, I'll pay the price for it because I just love those like roasty coffee malt notes, and there is some of that here on the Talisker 18. But I think it's time to get this on the palate now. We'll go back to the nose. I think I need to get this on the palate, acclimate to it, so that I can dig a little bit deeper. Cheers. Round. Very round. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interestingly... Oh, I gotta stop talking. Yeah, that does some things. Mid-palate into the finish, that does things. A couple backflips. Backflips on the palate. That's great. And in the finish now, I'm actually getting a little bit of a note that I only get every once in a while on whiskeys, which is kind of like a little cheesy bite, you know? Some kind of like a sharp white cheddar kind of thing on the back end. That's great. So for me, I did not actually pick up a lot of peat or smoky influence on the nose of this 18-year, probably in some part because the 10-year has so much of that, and, you know, I'm coming off of that, but also because, again, this is a little bit more mellow with 8 more years in the cask. The palate, though, still shows that influence. It's a little bit, to me, a little bit heavier of a, almost like more into the barbecue realm of the peat, as opposed to that more mineral wet rock cigarette ash. This is something that I experienced recently on the Port Charlotte 18, where the 18 actually has more barbecue peatiness than the 10-year, which was kind of a little bit of a brighter peat. I don't know if this is a facet kind of across the board that we can, you know, make a rule out of or an expectation out of, where if you age something longer, the peat gets darker and a little bit heavier and the smokiness gets that way. I'm not sure if that's the case. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you've had that experience with tasting like a younger core offering, you know, peated product or smoky product versus like an older edition of that. Does the older one always have a darker smokiness to it? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But that's kind of the sensation I'm getting on the palate of this 18-year. Yeah, I just think overall, it's more put together. It's more comprehensive on the nose. So actually, it's harder to pick out individual notes. I'm going to stick in that realm of overripe tropical fruits, caramelized orange, just an overall caramel note, some of that coffee, again, some of that leather. And it just smells rich. That's the best way to put it. A little bit more dense on the nose. All right, second sip now. Yeah, this is great. It's great whiskey. Kind of a similar thing as it works its way onto the palate, where in the middle of the palate is where there's an explosion of these a little bit, you know, more sour fruit notes. And as we work into the finish now, that's when this leather note is coming in, which the 10-year definitely did not have. This one, yeah, very, very good stuff. You know, price-wise on this, is the Talisker 18-year worth it? You know, I think so. I want to say this is around $180. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. I was just reading before this review, and I was getting kind of mixed signals on the price point here. Price-wise on this, I think it's fine, you know. I know I'm pointing to the 10-year box with the 18-year samples over here. Yeah, overall, I think it's solid stuff. It doesn't, like, it's not mind-blowing whiskey. It's just very, very good, and I think it's interesting for me to experience something like this, something coastal, something with that peat at an 18-year age statement. I do like this experience, you know. I think to some degree the truest sense of some of these coastal peated whiskeys is actually at that 10-year mark. Like, it's in the core range where you can taste so much of the spirit still before the cask takes over. But I do, again, think it's kind of an interesting exercise, and it's kind of a reward and just like a special occasion thing to try an 18-year version of this. So, look, I think I would recommend the Talisker 18 for sure. I would absolutely recommend the Talisker 10-year. Let me know what you guys think about this stuff. To me, because I'm not spending so much money on Scotch, I'm a little more picky, I guess. With American whiskey, I unfortunately drop way too much money on just any run-of-the-mill, special release that we're expecting for the year. I'll drop way too much on secondary because I'm used to doing it. But for Scotch, I find myself still being picky. So my value judgments on Scotch are a little skewed as compared to my American whiskey. Maybe it's actually in a good way that I'm pickier on the Scotch front. But if this was around $180 or something along those lines, like, that's the most I would want to pay for something like this. I understand the $10 per year thing for the 18 years. I do think they've shot up in recent years to a point that's starting to become a little untenable, specifically for your Glenlivets, your Glenfiddichs, your Glenmorangies. Those things are certainly overpriced these days. But for the peated stuff, for the coastal stuff, I'm a little more forgiving of paying up for those higher age statements, just because the experience is, I think it's a little bit more unique in those higher age ranges for these particular whiskeys. So I love these Taliskers. The 10-year to me is quintessential spring, summertime whiskey. The 18-year, I wouldn't necessarily actually put it in that category. I would just say it's more of a special occasion dram overall, but still really good stuff. So thanks, Lito, for sending the sample my way. And let me know what you guys think, of both of these whiskeys. But that's going to do it. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon. Cheers, and I will see you guys soon here on Drums and Drams.